The White Bear Area Chamber of Commerce and On Location TV19 are proud to present Your Business Matters, dedicated to your business needs. The White Bear Area Chamber is a nonprofit business organization serving as an advocate for the White Bear area and its business community. Now, here is the Executive Director of the White Bear Area Chamber and the host of Your Business Matters, Tom Snell.
Welcome to Your Business Matters, brought to you by the White Bear Area Chamber of Commerce. Each month, we interview community leaders and local business owners so you can be informed about the developments in our community. Today, I am pleased to welcome Shaun Williams-Wyche, PhD at the Community Department of Social Sciences, Metropolitan State University. Dr. Williams and I will discuss what the heck is going on in the political campaigns based on the Super Tuesday results and the results preceding Super Tuesday. We will look at what is causing the insurgencies for Donald Trump and, to a lesser extent, the campaign for Bernie Sanders. Thank you very much for joining me today, Dr. Wyche. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Tom, for having me.
Okay, and I really want to start out with what the heck is going on. I mean, I'm interviewing you right after Super Tuesday. As you know, Donald Trump, the Republican candidate, was able to take states all the way down from Arkansas and Tennessee to almost a majority of people in the state of Massachusetts. So he seems to have a broad reach across the country. Nobody thought he was going anywhere back a few months ago. And what's going on?
Well, that's a very interesting observation that you made, Tom. And we're seeing this unprecedented phenomenon with a person who's never been elected, even dog catcher.
Yeah.
That's all of a sudden now the front runner for one of the major parties' a nomination for president of the United States. And so with this Trump phenomenon, like you said, he's winning in every part of the country, in the Northeast, in the South, out West, and even in the heartland. And so what this represents is that Trump has been able to bring in different factions of the Republican Party and also all the while bring in new voters. And we see that.
Who are some of these new voters?
Well, some of these new voters come from people who have previously stayed out of the last few electoral processes. Also, some Democrats who've felt disaffected and have come over as well.
Democrats?
Yes. And just a random smattering of just people who ultimately are fed up with how the system, as they perceive this, how the system in Washington's been running.
And I want to ask you a little bit about being fed up by the system. Did anybody, I mean, were there a lot of people that saw this coming? this idea that we're just not going to take it anymore? I mean, if you look, to a certain extent, the economy is a little bit better anyway than it was back in 2007. We made some improvements that way. I mean, we're not faced with a major war right now. So why has this major issue come up where people are dissatisfied and we're not going to take it anymore? We're going to give the middle finger to the political class. I mean, did anybody see this?
Maybe not Trump specifically, but the writing was all over the wall.
Oh, it was.
For this sort of phenomenon to grow. And a large part of that is due, if you look at the case of the Republicans, among the electorate, there is a large dissatisfaction with Washington politicians in general, even those politicians within the Republican Party as well, specifically in the House and Senate leadership.
Would that be the reason why somebody like John Kasich, who is the governor of Ohio, which is always considered to be the state that a party has to take if they're going to win the White House, they have to take Ohio. So here's a governor with a lot of support among people in that state, and he's almost running dead last.
Yes, and what we're seeing that people from what is called the establishment of the Republican Party just having a horrible time this election cycle. We saw that also with Jeb Bush, how he had racked up many more endorsements than any other candidate in the primary season and still ended up dropping out after South Carolina. And Donald Trump, at least until about a couple of weeks ago, had 0 endorsements from any sitting governors or any sitting members of Congress.
And in South Carolina, didn't he go after and condemn George Bush, the one of the most popular figures in South Carolina, and it didn't seem to cause any problem?
Yeah, it seems that whatever Trump says, mainly his base of support doesn't care. And we saw that how that was symbolic of how Trump was attacking President Bush's administration. That's symbolic of how there's been this boiling up anger for probably the past 10 years or so within the Republican electorate and the conservative electorate over how their leaders have been going about business in Washington.
I want to ask just a few more questions about Donald Trump. I mean, I don't want to dominate the whole discussion on that, but a wall. He's going to build this big wall with a big door in the middle of it, I guess, so that people can go back in after they're sent out. He's going to let 11 million people are going to be rounded up and are going to go through this wall. Do people actually believe that?
Well, first, for a wall to get built, he would first have to at least get it through Congress, and there's no guarantee that he would get the support in Congress for a lot of his policies. For instance, Lindsey Graham has come out the other day and said that the liar is a preferable choice over their crazy person. And he's talking
about Ted Cruz, right?
He's talking about Hillary versus Trump.
Oh.
And there has been recently a U.S. Senator from Nebraska, Ben Sasse, who's come out and said that he will not vote for Trump in the general election. So it's not going to be a sure thing that he's going to get the support from Congress for his policies if he does get elected.
The Republican Party, back in 1964, there was a split in the Republican Party between kind of the Western conservatives that were with Goldwater and at that time were the traditional Republicans on the East Coast, and that was a split. Is this potential split worse than that split?
Well, the split back in 1964 that you're referring to was in part due to the nomination battle between Barry Goldwater and Nelson Rockefeller. Goldwater, who represented the new up-and-coming modern conservative wing of the Republican Party, and Nelson Rockefeller, who represented the Northeast established, more moderate wing of the party. And ultimately, Goldwater prevailed, but ended up losing badly in the general election against Lyndon Johnson, and only won states in the Deep South, which Goldwater became the first person from the Republican Party to win a majority of their electoral votes from the South. So then that led to the ultimate realignment of the two parties within the country.
Do you think it's going to happen again?
Well, it's too early to say right now, but what some observers have been saying is that if Trump does become the nominee, they fear that it would be another Goldwater-style defeat where Trump would only win a few states and his opponent, which is looking more and more like Hillary Clinton, would dominate.
Right.
But that, on the other hand, what that gave the Republicans the opportunity to do in 1964 was to start from the ashes again and rebuild the party to what they have now in modern times. So it gives them fertile ground to actually start anew, say, if they burn the house down.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back into that issue just a little bit more as we continue, but right now I'm going to take a brief break. I have a couple of quick announcements about chamber happenings. On March 15th at the Fairfield Inn in Vadnais Heights, the chamber will hold a special session on the graying of the White Bear area workforce. Our special guest is Susan Browner, the new Minnesota State demographer. This event will run from 7:30 to 9 a.m. Please visit the Chamber website, www.whitebearchamber.com, to learn about other fantastic upcoming events. Now, continuing with our conversation, we were talking about what's going on with the Republican Party. I want to bring up another scenario that I've read about recently, and that's a third party. And I've heard everything from Michael Bloomberg, who is the mayor of New York, as a potential candidate for a third party, to Mitt Romney and everything else in between. Do you think that's actually going to happen if Trump gets the nomination? Do you think there will be a third party that could break away from the Republican Party to go into the general election?
Well, third parties generally sprout out during presidential election years because of splits within parties, existing parties. Mm-hmm. And while it's too early to be seen right now, it's not out of the realm of actual possibilities that mm-hmm. someone could run as a third-party candidate. And what this third-party person would do, obviously, would be taking votes more primarily from the Republican side, since that's where most of the divisions have been this campaign season, at least mm-hmm. in regarding people bolting the party and deciding to run a third party. And that's another theme that we see over many, many years, is that successful third-party candidates usually come from a big fight or split within an existing party. And so we saw that with the Democrats in 1948 with Strom Thurmond, and again in 1968 with George Wallace. And on the right, we saw that in 1992 with Ross Perot. And so those candidates took votes that usually went for the party that they left at the time. So that is the problem that's facing the Republican Party right now. And so one of the issues, though, is if someone runs third party, one of the prime things would be ballot access, since it's much harder. It's a much harder hurdle if you're not part of the two major parties to get on the ballot mm-hmm. in most states. And so that's something they'd have to run up with.
Now, I want to revisit something we talked a little bit earlier about, and that is, do you think that Trump will be the nominee for the Republican Party? I mean, if you were a betting person, what kind of odds would you give?
Well, I'll say that.
I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm just interested to hear what your perspective would be.
Well, I'll say this, Tom, that I believe after Super Tuesday, two things happened. One, Trump was cemented as the front runner going forward, and two, Cruz cemented himself as the main challenger to Trump going forward, due to all of his results. And ultimately, what Trump's opponents are going to hope for is that Trump doesn't end up with a majority of delegates by the time all the states have run their contests. And so you already hear these talks from the Rubio and Kasich campaigns about waiting it out to the convention and having a fight at the convention over delegates in that case. But there's a couple of things that mm-hmm. are actually helping Trump right now going forward.
Okay, and what are they?
Well, one, we have March 15th coming up, which is the date that Ohio and Florida
But, okay, you said Ohio and Florida. Now, Rubio is the senator from Florida, and Kasich is the governor of Ohio. One would assume that Rubio would win in Florida and Kasich would win in Ohio, right?
Right. But the problem is that Kasich hasn't been polling too well in Ohio. And it's like, as far as how he'd like to poll, being that's his home state. And Rubio hasn't been polling as well as he'd like to in his home state of Florida. And why that's a problem is that March 15th is the first date in the Republican calendar that states can start having winner-take-all contests where the person who ends up with the most votes takes all the delegates.
So do you think that Trump is actually going to win some of these winner-take-all states?
Right now, and this actually gets to the second reason that Trump has an advantage going forward, and that's because none of the other candidates are getting out of the race right now and keeping the vote split. And so we basically have a game of chicken among the various rivals to Trump on who's going to stay in and who's going to leave. And so there hasn't been one sole alternative to Trump that people have coalesced around, even though, like I said, after last night, the at least nationwide consensus will be that Cruz is the person most in the position to challenge Trump. But if Trump comes out and wins Ohio and Florida, and starts winning other winner-take-all states after that, even without having a majority, he'll be well on his way to the nomination.
Well, if he wins Florida, that'll be goodbye for Rubio, right?
Yep, exactly.
And right now, Trump is ahead in Florida.
Yes. And the interesting thing is that the delegate haul for Ohio and Florida, if the same person wins both states, and that person is not Trump, in this case would be Ted Cruz. If Ted Cruz won both states, he'd jump past Trump in the delegate total right now. But there's another issue as well. The states that are coming in between now and March 15th are states that right now are favoring Trump. So like Louisiana, Kentucky, Idaho, and
oh wow.
And so those states haven't voted yet, and so Trump will probably add to his margin by then. And
then he'll have more momentum going into the next states.
Because, at this point, it's about, originally, when the contest first starts in Iowa, New Hampshire, it's all about momentum. Yeah. The delegate count for those states are very insignificant, a drop in the bucket.
Well, real quickly, what the heck happened in Minnesota? I mean, it's the one state in the nation that Rubio actually carried. And then obviously on the Democrat side, you had Bernie Sanders. So any comments on Minnesota?
Yes, with Minnesota first with Republicans and how Rubio got his first victory finally. In recent cycles, Minnesota, at least for the Republicans, as far as the Republicans are concerned, have kind of bucked the national trend. So, for instance, in 2008, they gave the support to Mitt Romney, while John McCain eventually got the nomination. In 2012, they voted for Rick Santorum, while Mitt Romney.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes. Well, the case with Minnesota, though, was in 2012 was that Santorum won the straw poll vote.
Oh, okay.
But then Ron Paul ended up coming out with the most delegates in Minnesota, which is they changed the rules now for 2016 because of that.
That's unusual. It shows the kind of people, I guess, that attend the caucuses. So.
Yep. And actually going to the other side, that's what helped Bernie as well, because Minnesota has a caucus. Caucuses tend to favor people who are more energetic, more activist-oriented, and those are the people that end up turning up.
Okay. Now, as we're moving towards the end of our interview, the last question I wanted to ask you, do you think that there's anything that the Republican establishment can do to throw a curveball at the convention? To deny Trump if he comes in like with the most delegates or comes in with a majority of delegates? Can they do anything to change things so that he ends up on the short end of the stick?
Well, there has been talk about this, and one of the things that keeps coming up is that the fact that there's a lot of delegates on the Republican side, probably up to 70%, where the people who, the delegates are pledged only to their candidate on the first ballot. And then after the first ballot, they can vote for whoever. And so there's already talks about doing dealings or finding out ways, bringing up old arcane party rules in that case. And so it should be interesting, but I think that would only be the case if Trump did not have a significant lead among the delegates. Even if he had below 50%, if he still had, if he was close to 50%, I think that he would ultimately get the nomination. But if he got maybe like in the 30s and there was Cruz or Rubio close behind him, I think then that's when you would start seeing the fighting.
Okay. Well, that is really interesting. So stay tuned. It should be a very interesting, innovative, and exciting legislation coming up for the presidential race. So thank you very much. I appreciate you coming.
Thank you, Tom.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. Williams, for joining me today on Your Business Matters. I'm Tom Snell. Thanks for watching.
For more information on this program or the White Bear Area Chamber, visit whitebearchamber.com or call 651-429-8593.